In this video, we are going to learn about not one, but two very important tools that most web designers and web developers use all the time. And that's Google Font and the so-called developer tools. So, as I mentioned in the last lecture, most of the time we use some external fonts in order to style our pages. So in this example, we have this font right here and this one. So basically, for most of the text, we have this more normal looking font. And then we have this font family over here, which is a bit more special for the headline and also for these buttons here. Okay. So fonts are really important to give designs a personality. And so we shouldn't just use something like we did here. So we sans serif, which is just a very regular and non-special font. And instead, we can go for something like this, which makes the app look a bit more special. So gives it some personality. And in order to find fonts and to include fonts in our web applications or websites, we can use a tool called Google Fonts. So just search for Google Fonts, and then it should be the very first result. And yeah, that's the one. So the fonts that I selected are called Sono. So that's this one. So just click on it. And then here you have like a preview. And then down here you have the different font weights in which the font is available. So weights is basically how bold the font is. So regular is 400. So usually we should always select that. So just click this button here, which says select regular 400. Now let's close that. And then we also usually need some bolder ones. So let's close this one and let's select 600 and maybe 700. So we don't really know yet which font weights we will want to use. So let's just select some more, and then later we will see as we experiment with the fonts, because we will be able to set basically this weight. So these values like 600 or 700 in our CSS. Okay, so we selected all of them and they are now up here. So in this list. But first, before we actually import this into our app, so into the HTML file, let's first go back and select another one. So we can click here on this logo, for example, to go back. And then the second font that I selected, so the one for the more regular text, or actually this one is the one for the heading, is this one. So it's called Koine. So a bit rounder one, looks a bit more fun and playful. And yeah, this one is only available in this 400 weight, I think. So that's an easy choice. Just click on adding it. And then here we have both of them. So we have Sono and Koine. Now, if you're watching this video far in the future, then probably this design of Google Font has changed a little bit. But hopefully you can still figure out how you can basically select different fonts so that in the end you end up with an import link like this. So basically we will need to take this code here and copy it. And maybe you recognize this link element here. So if we go back to our HTML, remember that we basically connected the HTML with our CSS file using the link element, right? And so now from here, we can copy these other link elements. So to connect this HTML file with the CSS files that basically contain the font from Google Font. So that sounds a bit confusing again, but that's just how it works. So these fonts are basically also in CSS files, and we can now load them from Google. Okay, give it a save, and here we are. It's just very important that you place them before our own CSS file. Okay, so first the Google fonts and then our own CSS. And that's actually it. And now, as they tell us here, we can just use these two font names in our CSS. So one is called Sono, so we can use Sono as the font family, and the other one, Koine. So Koine is this one, I believe. Yeah, this one is Koine. So this one was for the headings. And so we can come here to the H1 and write font family Koine. Okay, give it a save, and there it is. Beautiful. So that looks really nice, and we're starting to see some more personality. So something a bit more different about this app. And now we want the same here also for these technology tags, basically. But before we do that, I want to show you something, which is that here, after the first name, we also have a second value. So this sans serif here, or even this cursive. So what this means is that if we specify more than one value for the font family, the second one will be used when the first one cannot be loaded. So let's imagine that the HTML file was loading, but as it was trying to load the font files from Google, it somehow failed, and so it couldn't load the font. So then the browser doesn't know what font family to use, and so we can basically give it a fallback. So let's use the sans serif keyword again. So basically this one here. Yeah, what I wanted to do is to also add this font family to the span. Okay, and of course we could also give it some other fallback. So the Arial that we were using before, for example, right? But that's not really important. So usually the font loading should be no problem, and so just the sans serif fallback should be enough. So let's check it out, and yeah, looking nice, but let's make it even nicer by also styling the paragraphs. So instead of sans serif, we now want Sono first. And there it is. Beautiful. So that's how we include third-party fonts or external fonts. Now, we are actually starting to see some problems here on our page, at least one small problem. Notice this 200 here. So this text here was not supposed to be styled in the same way as these tags here, so as these categories. So these ones are bold and with this special font, but this is also a span, right? So in the form, you see that this is also a span, right? And so of course, this element also gets selected just like these other ones. So just like this one, for example. And so of course, it also gets bold and it also has this font size. But it's not supposed to. We actually don't want that. We want the regular size here. So basically we are running into a problem here with this span selector. And imagine even another situation. So let's say that we had another paragraph somewhere. So maybe right after this list here. Let's say built by Jonas. So just temporary. But let's say that this text here should just be very small. So it shouldn't have all this big size and not be as big as the facts. So that's kind of a problem, right? Because we need to select this paragraph here in a different way than these ones. So how could we do that? Well, basically we can give these paragraphs here a special name and then select them by that name. So that's best exemplified by actually doing it. So the way that we give elements a name is by specifying the class attribute. So class, and then let's say that this is a fact. All right. And now let's go ahead and use the same name here on this other paragraph, because this one is also a fact. So class, fact. Not like that. Okay. So for now, of course, everything looks the same. So nothing changes for now, but now we will actually change it. So going back to our style, we can now change the selector. So instead of selecting all the paragraph elements, we only want to select the ones which have the class of fact. So we can use the class selector, which is dot, and then the name of the class. So that's fact. So we write dot fact, and so now this rule will only apply to all the elements that have the class of fact. So let's give it a save. And so these two elements look the same as before, but this one, which does not have the class of fact, has no styling applied to it at all. And so that's just what we were looking for. And now let's do the same thing with these category tags here. So very simple. We just come to this span here and we give it the class of tag, for example. And of course we could give it any name that we want, but we should just use a name that makes sense. So both of them are tags. And again, for now, nothing changes because we need to change our CSS. So now we no longer want to select all the spans, but only the ones that have the class of tag. And so now when we save this, these two should stay the same, but this one should go back to basically have no styles at all. And indeed, that's what happened. And so when we write CSS, usually most of the time we style using classes. In the case of the h1 here, it's not a problem because there's only one h1. And so we can safely keep using the element selector, and the same with the unordered list. Because in fact, we do want all the unordered list elements to have no list style. Even if we kept adding more and more, usually we never want them to have the bullet points. And so this is safe to do here. Okay, and now finally, as I said in the beginning of this lecture, we are actually going to learn about another tool in this video. So that tool is the developer tools, which is a tool that is vital to our work as web developers. So we can open that in different ways. The one I like the most is to simply right-click somewhere on the page and then click Inspect. Okay, and then it opens this panel here. Let's make it a bit smaller and zoom in a bit so you can see it. Not that much, maybe. Okay. Make it a bit bigger even. Well, then it disappears. So let's just make all of it bigger. Now, as I said, there are multiple ways. So another one is to just, in the menu bar, we go here to View, and then Developer, and then Developer Tools. And then here we need to go to the Elements tab. So what we see here is that we have the exact representation of the page that we built in our HTML. So going back here, you see that we have the header, the form, and the main. And so, of course, that's also what we can see here with this nice highlighting. And then, of course, we can open it up and explore the entire HTML tree, basically. And here we can now do all kinds of manipulations. For example, we could just hit delete here, and then this HTML would be gone, right? And so that's why it's called developer tools, because it's for us developers to do some experiments. And we could get rid of this, and yeah, of everything. Now we can just reload it and everything gets back because, of course, this does not affect the HTML file itself. Now, usually what's more interesting is actually the styles here on the right side. So if we come here, for example, to the H1 that we already styled, so if we select it, here we can see all the styles that we have been applying, right? So here we have the font size and everything really. And what's really cool about this is that we can now turn these styles on and off, basically to run some experimentations. For example, I can just basically remove this text align property just to see what it looks like without it. Or the same thing with the font size, or I can try to make it bigger here. I can try to just write another number, or I can even use the up and down arrow keys and just keep increasing it like this. So this is extremely useful when we're designing in the browser, just to run some quick experimentations to see how different properties look like. So maybe we are not really sure if we want to make the text uppercase, so we can just, well, turn it on and off like this. We can also see that many different CSS rules are actually applying to the same element. So down here we have another H1, but here it says user agent style sheet, which basically is some CSS that is a default CSS from the browser. So by default, the font size is this 2M value. And so If we turn off the font size, then that is the font size that we get. Okay, so this is the font size that we have without any styling, and it comes directly from the browser. But then once we activate our own, then this one from the browser gets overwritten. All right, and the same thing actually happens when we select the element multiple times, but a bit more about that later. For now, I just want you to experiment maybe a little bit with this tool, as it can be a lot of fun, and yeah, you can run some experiments as I was saying. And then, yeah, once you're ready doing that, you can just move on to the next video.